So today what we're going to talk about for about the next hour or so is a series of forensic case studies that I entitled "Those Who Don't Learn from the Past Are Doomed to Repeat It." Yours truly. So I took and sat down and just said, well, let's take a look at some of the headlines on the security feeds. And you've probably read about a few of these. And it's just worse. In this morning's email, there was the news of one of the largest botnets ever being broken up in Spain. And the network had over 39,000 command and control servers. And they were renting the entire botnet out for about $2,500 US every couple of days. And its main target were the gaming networks, the online gaming networks. And they were doing massive HTTP GET floods, TCP SYN floods, and UDP port scans to basically blackmail players and stuff into paying money. So that headline isn't here. But here's what we're going to look at today. I'm going to start off with one that just about every one of us has this vulnerability on our system. And that's the UPnP. I call it the unforeseen threat. Then my favorite one to beat up on, by your own destruction, Internet of Things, and some of the exploits. One that unfortunately we're all familiar with, ransomware. I've already briefly talked about botnets. I'll show you a little bit more information about them, and we'll be able to put it into context, I guess. And then an old favorite, man in the middle. It originated in the Ethernet world, but now with wireless, it's everywhere. And then the application attacks, the web phishing things, bogus websites, and of course, those lovely emails that we all get in our spam folders. So I'm often asked, what's the difference between troubleshooting and forensics? In troubleshooting, we use the information collected by Wireshark to try to answer two key questions. Basically, what is the cause of my problem? And how do I locate it and fix it? We say other things that we're going to get around to doing other things, but these are the two key questions. Now, in forensic analysis, we use the same Pcap packet captures. We just ask different questions. We usually start off with some kind of damage assessment. Are things non-functional? Do we need to bring in outside expertise, the FBI, local police, or whatever? We always attempt to identify who the intruder was and how did they get in. Was it through a phishing email that somebody clicked on? Was it a file? Was it a vulnerability? What was it? And then the last two questions, did the intruder leave anything behind? And is there sufficient data? These have become more and more important as Pcap evidence is now routinely showing up in court cases. With the proliferation of remote working, remote learning, cloud storage and things, it's becoming more critical. So when we say, did the intruder leave anything behind? Several of the cases that I've consulted on were just basically the intruder or the hacker, for lack of a better term, gained access into the network, realized what he had done, and couldn't get away fast enough. And then in other cases, though, the intruders will break in, they'll load malware, keyloggers, Trojans, etc. And also in the more advanced cases, you'll see that they create a series of accounts, usually with administrator or super user privileges, so that they can come back at a later date. And again, as I said earlier, Pcap evidence is showing up more and more. The Pcaps you may end up having to invoke law enforcement for some of these situations. So the question is, do we have sufficient data to analyze and reproduce the attack, either in court or to verify that whatever solution we implement will actually work and prevent it from happening again? Now, one of the key strategies that I teach my students And I mentioned in presentations like this, how do you know if something's unusual or abnormal unless you have some references? And we use a series of what I like to call baseline files to identify these things. And forensic engineers and network analysts all build up libraries of these files. They're known samples of this is good. I can compare it to the suspect file and look for differences, things that I can, starting points I can use to troubleshoot. So here are a few of the locations. One of the best ones and the quickest and easiest ones to get to is simply go to the Wireshark wiki. And there they have, I think the last time I counted, about 280 sample captures. And they're constantly updating these. So these are known documented capture files. Pcapper.net, I get a lot of good information from there. And then you can see many of these others. The files you download, the files themselves are safe, as long as you don't export any of the malicious traffic. And as always, I tell people, if you've got a question or you're looking for a particular thing, feel free to drop me an email. And it's phil@merlionskeep.org. Nice and simple. Now, using Wireshark, you don't have to be an expert. You don't have to have used it for 15 years or 20 years or whatever. But what you do need to do to be effective at both troubleshooting and forensic analysis is master these key statistics. Protocol hierarchy, the conversations, the endpoints, packet links if you're dealing with encrypted traffic, the DNS menus, the flowcharts, and then the HTTP statistics. If you can master these key items, you're in good shape. I think I do 60, maybe even 70% of my work using just these menus. So things to look for: unusual communications. You should know your network well enough to realize that node A should not be talking to node B. Unusual protocols and ports. This is, I can't stress this one enough. I probably should have made this the first item. If you don't use TFTP in your network, for example, and you detect the presence of TFTP, it's a good idea to investigate it. Watch for unusual ports. In your network, you should know the normal service ports that you have open in your firewalls and the application ports that are in use on normal traffic. If I take a look, one of the filters that I have students build in class is a filter that identifies TCP SYN requests versus SYN ACK requests. Normally, the ratio should be approximately 1-to-1. One SYN should generate one SYN ACK. The numbers may be off slightly because of however you captured or when you started your capture, but they should be roughly equal. If they're not equal, you need to investigate immediately. Suspicious inbound connections, that goes along with unusual communication pairs. I was working with a bank recently. They had reason to suspect their teller machines had been breached. And one of the very first things we caught was communications streaming out to Hong Kong. Now, Hong Kong is still an international banking capital, so by itself, Hong Kong wasn't a big red flag, except when I asked the bank, do you do any business with Hong Kong? They were very adamant that they do not. So that became instantly a suspect connection. The same goes with outbound connections. If you don't do business, to use this previous example, if you don't do business in Hong Kong, you shouldn't be posting HTTP data to a server located there. And then the big one, this is one of the hidden little tricks that we use in the forensic world. The traffic may be encrypted, but often the DNS is not. So we always filter out and take a look at DNS queries and replies. Now, this one is not holding up really well now that we're starting to see a rise in encrypted DNS. But so far, at least, encrypted DNS is the exception rather than the rule. So the first one, Hiding in plain sight, UPnP. This stands for Universal Plug and Play. It was a standard that was finalized in December of 2008, upnp.org, and it uses something very interesting. It uses the HTTP that we're all familiar with, but it runs it across UDP port 1900. So we have an example here. Here's a capture from, I don't remember where. It is one of my work computers. And here you can see the HTTP notifies being transmitted on UDP port 1900, and they're being sent out with a multicast. Now the notifies, the function of the notifies is to allow my machine to notify everybody within reach of this layer 3 multicast that my device is here and it supports plug and play. The companion to these notifies are searches. The searches, also done on 1900, also on a multicast IP address. The function of these is to, when I'm looking to connect to another plug and play device, such as a printer, a gaming console, or whatever, this is how I locate them. Now I want you to take a close look here and notice it's not just IP4. Plug and play runs across IP6 as well. Now these again are from my machine. They're the link local IP6 addresses. They will only work inside the subnet that I'm connected to. But you can see he is still going out to the multicast range, and he's trying to do the notifies and he's trying to do the searches. So if you want to see this on your system, simply go ahead and make a capture of your own traffic. 10 or 15 minutes will suffice. Filter for UDP port 1900 and prepare to be surprised. Now, you can disable this. You absolutely can block this. If you disable it, however, and you want to connect to a printer, you're now going to have to manually construct the connection, or your game console, or whatever device it is that's using plug and play. So most people are not even aware that these things exist. And if you look on the Internet Storm Center run by SANS, and you look under the port numbers that are being attacked, UDP 1900 is almost always on the weekly top 10. When we're doing penetration testing, this is one of the first things we look for. We go after this port right away because it's pretty much universal. It really is. It's everywhere. So now, here you can see close-ups of the examples that I showed you in the Pcap. Let's take a look at IoT. I call it bring your own destruction IoT. The devices are ubiquitous. They're everywhere. They are everywhere. I'm pretty sure that everybody here has at least one of these type devices at home. One of the most controversial was this talking Barbie. Over in Europe, it ended up being banned because it would talk to the children and collect information. Gaming consoles, all kinds of equipment here. This is used for television shows being projected over the wiring within a house. This is from the Netherlands. I picked these up when I was over there. Everybody's favorite, the Roomba. My wife has one of these, the animated animals. And then, of course, the light bulbs, the Hue light bulbs. So IoT, sometimes you'll hear this SOHO, small office, home office. So IoT uses primarily 2.4 gigahertz ISM bands. But then if you look here at the various logos, there's a lot of other technologies involved. So you've got everything from RFID, good old Bluetooth, ZigBee, Z-Wave, Home RF, WiMAX. These are just a few. These are just a few. There's many more technologies. Why IoT? It's sort of like the wild, wild west right now. It seems like every other day there's some new technology or new gadget with IoT. And right now there are no standardized rules for what protocols to use, what frequency bands to use, whether the data is encrypted or not, how much data they're allowed to collect, what they're allowed to do with the data. Very few regulations right now. So IoT vulnerabilities. I came across this graphic. Here you go. Got it from Centia. And it kind of surprised me. I mean, I know about the Mirai botnets and things like that. And in San Francisco, there's a group of entrepreneurs, shall we say, that hold Friday night and Saturday night drive around tours where they basically pick up on people's camera feeds from inside the house. And basically you get to watch whatever's in range as you're riding along for the tour. So keep that in mind if you're using internal cameras. So as of 2019, 120,000 plus published vulnerabilities. And that number is extremely low. It really is. 2019, we saw the Mirai botnet. It had 14 million IoT devices in the botnet. And that's pretty frightening if you think about it. So looking at Bluetooth, we all use. Everybody uses Bluetooth. Looking around here in my office, 1, 2, 3, I can see at least 3 Bluetooth enabled devices just where I'm sitting. Bluetooth used to be extremely short range, limited to about 3 feet or less. But as Bluetooth technology has matured, you now have multiple types of Bluetooth radios with multiple ranges up to 100 meters. I know when my wife syncs her phone to her car, her new car, the speakers, she can hold that signal, I'd say a good 15 or 20 meters or about 50, 60 feet. So that's definitely not the low power setting I use on my headset when I'm driving or on my Bluetooth speakers. So it's a mature technology. I mean, it's a networking technology. And we have here a sample of a capture. To perform this one, we moved a file between 2 mobile phones. Now we did turn off encryption. Bluetooth provides a basic encryption factor. And we have, that's the hue light bulbs. We'll come to those in a moment. So this, you can see the data is very simple. Wireshark decodes it quite effectively, actually. And you have your expert linking the various frames, which frame connects to who for doing what. And we captured this with a little $15 Bluetooth capture, USB capture device I bought on Amazon. So we're not talking complicated technology here. Now, this is one of my favorites, the Fitbits or the Nokia Withings. Quite a few of us have them. I was giving a presentation at a conference recently, and one of the people came up, rolled their sleeve up, and showed me this one. I mean, he took it off and laid it on the table. That's where I got the picture. And they now sell all sorts of peripheral devices that connect into it. So here you can see the smart sleep system where your band connects in and collects data to tell when you're sleeping, when you go into deep sleep, and so on and so on and so forth. And then, of course, we have everybody's arch enemy, the bathroom scale. Now, they call it a smart body analyzer. This combines the data it collects with the data from the wristband, and unfortunately for us, forwards it off to Nokia. And here you can see one of the packets we captured from a session. This was with the wristband and the bathroom scale, that smart body analyzer. And you can see that it's going out, and it's going out in plain text. Now, I deliberately hid the post so that you can't see any of the data here. But now take a look at this. They even embed a little Easter egg. If you're looking for a job with them, there's the URL for the US. So, there are no rules right now about this stuff. Now, Bluetooth, unfortunately, has a number of issues. The Blue Bug vulnerability dates all the way back to 2004. And this basically allows somebody to take control of your phone if you have Bluetooth enabled. So it can be, your phone can be in your pocket, or like mine is right now, sitting here on the table. And they can turn it in to an eavesdropping device, or they can send and read your SMS messages, etc. There's a pretty substantial set of databases online in various places that you can look at that tell you how to do it for each model phone. Good old blue snarfing. This goes back to 2004. This is the gentleman that did it. He's a US hacker. And no, that is not a Star Wars blaster or a ray gun. It's a Yagi antenna turned into, instead of a semi-directional, it's turned into a directional. And you might recognize this young lady here. Well, he hacked her Nokia 6310 phone from 2 kilometers away. And these are a couple of the pictures he pulled off the phone. Now, I have this one labeled as an exploit of Tesla. You can see here the cars are driving down the line and the lights are blinking on and off. Somebody from Tesla got in contact with me, and he pointed out that this was actually an update, a mass update to the firmware in the Teslas being done in a parking lot. But I like it because it illustrates how many devices you could affect from just one car. So this is what you're seeing here is not a hack, but think about the wider repercussions. If somebody gained access and all they got to do is load it up and drive it down the road. In case you think that's not terribly possible, we've got our buddy ZigBee. ZigBee is extremely popular both in Europe and Asia. Not so popular here in the United States, but it's gaining ground as more and more equipment is developed. Very low data rates. You definitely don't want to build a ZigBee network if you're going to move files and data. But it's great for things like turn on, turn off, control volume, things of that nature. It's even got its own IEEE standards. And it just like you saw in Bluetooth, it has multiple capabilities on different frequency bands. So here we go. One of my students, I was teaching in the Netherlands at one of the police academies, and we were curious. He had just implemented some Phillips Hue light bulbs. So we were sitting there one evening in his house. I was meeting his family and having a very nice dinner. And we used a ZigBee capture, again, a little USB adapter you just plug in. And we did a quick capture. And we were surprised to see that the light bulbs, while talking with the base station, were collecting personal information. Now, right now, we've got some random numbers here, and we've got the word dead beef. We went back in and removed the PII and inserted this phrase. The trace, right here. You can see some lovely notifies again, so that's not limited to just us. And you're collecting the data, and we're pulling all of the data in. And you saw a close-up of one of the packets. And so I'm not sure why an adjustable light bulb needs to collect personal information, other than the fact your personal information is the new currency. Businesses buy and sell it. It's in the news all the time. So you need to watch out for this kind of stuff. Now, this is labeled version 1. There is now a version 2 where they say the data is encrypted. But take a look at this capture. I went back to my friend's house about a year or two later, and we collected the data. So I was showing you that Bluetooth-driven update of the Teslas. Here's an example of taking a known published exploit. And if you watch, you see the lights in these buildings late at night blinking on and off. It's kind of hard to see, but there's actually a drone flying right across here. And all the students did was load a ZigBee transmitter on there, transmitting the exploit. And they flew it by buildings in Paris to see which ones they could flip the light bulbs on and off with. So very, very interesting. I love looking at all of the corporate names here. So now imagine this, your house, your neighbor has his drone, he figures out the ZigBee exploit, you're using the Phillips Hue light bulbs. You never got around to patching them, and suddenly in the middle of the night, they start turning on and off on you. Okay. Back in the day, when we had actual cables connecting all of our equipment, you didn't worry about this kind of stuff too much. But like a lot of folks there, I use Wi-Fi connected networking equipment, including a printer. Now, I do have the encryption turned on, especially after coming across this exploit. Here you can see a couple of, well, actually 3 different ones where people's printers have been hacked. Now, these are receipt printers. These are receipt printers here. A friend of mine's printer, however, his regular LaserJet printer had the same thing. It suddenly started spewing out different messages. So this is something to watch out with, again, with the Wi-Fi. And that brings me to everybody's least favorite topic. It's in the news all of the time.
So we have a quick question about the Bluetooth.
Okay.
It's asking what Christopher's asking, what $15 Bluetooth capture tool did you use, or what capture devices do you recommend in general?
I tell you what, at the end of the presentation, I'll pull it up on the screen and show it to you.
Right on.
You can get an Ubertooth from Hack5. You can get an Adafruit. I think it's the Adafruit that I was using on Amazon. But I'll double check. It's over here in my drawer full of Wi-Fi toys. So I'll pull it out and take a look at it. So ransomware. There's hundreds and hundreds of variations of this screen. You read about hospitals. If you're on the East Coast of the United States, you might remember the pipeline company that controlled the flow of refined gasoline up and down the East Coast was hit with a ransomware, and it caused a massive crisis in the gasoline stations. The petrol stations ran out, and they ended up paying, but the hackers that attempted to extort them weren't very clever. They didn't take some basic precautions, and the FBI was able to get most of the money back. So score 1 for the good guys. So the ransomware, I went too far, I went the wrong way. The ransomware file sample I have here is Dridex, and it looks simple, looks like any other garden variety HTTP session till we start getting into some of the details. So I'll grab one of these, do the classic Wireshark follow stream, and here you see nothing really is unusual except perhaps the domain name. Then we see a load of data coming in. It's gzipped. Again, nothing unusual about that. It's not that large a file. It comes in, well, unfortunately for us, what it's going to do to our network is most unpleasant. So this is the actual Dridex ransomware. I'm not too worried about it because it's currently broken up now into about 170 packets. If I reassembled it and exported it, another story. And I'm going to run a quick using one of my filters.
We're at 30 minutes.
We're at 30 minutes? Okay, excellent. So it's flagging. I've built a malware filter looking for key strings, and it's flagging one of the packets, and that packet contains the capital letters MZ, which are a file format identifier for Windows system executables. So this particular flavor of the Dridex was targeting Windows machines. So when you're dealing with the Dridex, there are some alternatives, and I'll show you those here in a moment. But I want to talk about a drive-by exploit. This one was simply landing on a website. I lost the coin toss. We had been warned about this website. We were actually in China at the time. And before you ask, the URLs are blurred and key information has been blurred because the website is still functional. It's still out there. So my job was to simply land on the website, not click anything. And my 2 coworkers were capturing the data. Now, it purports to be an anti-Google website. So they want you to click and join. Well, before I even clicked and joined, you had a lovely piece of malware, the MD5EXE, come down onto my machine. And about 6 or 7 minutes afterwards, my cursor suddenly took off and started moving on its own and opening files and exploring my computer. MD5EXE opens up a back door on your computer. It literally gives someone access into your system. So fortunately, we knew about it, so we were capturing the data. But you can imagine your brother, sister, uncle, wife, mother, father, grandparents, whatever, not knowing to look for this kind of behavior, and it happens. So here again is a close-up of the Dridex, and you can see right there the magic file format identifier. Now, if you've been hit, yeah, it's unpleasant, but there are some alternatives. The Dutch police initially stood up a site called nomoreransom.org. And they started out as a very local thing. It's now international. There's over 100 organizations. What they do is they analyze the malware infections, and quite a few of the malware infections have very simple decryption mechanisms. And if they can determine which one it is, they'll post the tools. Now, about 2 weeks ago here in the United States, CISA posted another variation of this website called Stop Ransomware. It's on CISA.gov. I tell people if they get hit with ransomware, take a look at both sites. I've had 2 instances where people have actually been able to get the key without paying the ransom. So if you've been hit, you've got nothing to lose. So before you think about wiping the system completely, giving up all of your data, or paying a ransom of some amount, check it out. All right, botnets, Mirai command and control. Mirai is Japanese for the future. It was kind of different from your standard botnets because it targeted IoT devices, and it did a simple brute force. Now, this is an extract. There's about a 2.5 gig spreadsheet that shows all of the devices, and their default credentials. So these guys did their homework before they built this thing. And it targets, I mean, you can see here, it's all kinds of cameras, VoIP phones, and assorted others. And here it is, the command and control on Mirai. I got a huge laugh when we saw this. It's simple telnet, good old port 23, not even encrypted. Now this one hit home for me. I use a piece of equipment when I sleep. It helps me to breathe. And my model number showed up in this database. Now, I did not get hacked, but I can tell you this, when I got this new machine, it came with a little Wi-Fi adapter. And I asked the guy that was helping me set it all up and program it and everything, I said, what's that for? And he said, oh, it collects data and transmits it to the doctor so he can review it. And I'm like, okay, is there any kind of security on the data? Is it encrypted? And he's like, nah, we don't bother with any of that stuff. It slows it down too much. So I looked at him and said, is it removable? And he said, well, yeah, but then your doctor can't monitor. And so I immediately pulled it off. You can see my fingers there pulling it off. And behind it was a little SD card. And I said, what's that? And he says, well, that stores the data locally. And so when you go to the doctor, you can, if you don't use the wireless interface, you can take the card in. And so I'm thinking to myself, piece of medical equipment, it helps me breathe. I don't want somebody tinkering with it over the wireless, especially if it's unsecured. So the module, this S9 wireless module is now bouncing around in a drawer somewhere. And whenever I go into my doctor for a checkup, I just take the little SD card. And every time I go, they try to talk me into this module. And I'm like, no, thank you. So here's a Mirai attack. It's just a massive SYN flood. They use unsophisticated telnet and they use unsophisticated SYN floods. And here are just several Wireshark screens to give you an idea of what one looks like in Wireshark. And unfortunately, Mirai, among other things, took out a company in the US Southeast called Dyn, D-Y-N. Most of us had never heard of it. I'd never heard of it. But Dyn is one of the one of the 13 root level clusters for the internet. So when Dyn went down, about 60 or 70% of the eastern United States lost their internet for anywhere from 4 to 48 hours. So Mirai, it's still out there, variations of it. The source code was released, so there are some variations you can see. The 2019 is the green, the 2020 is the blue. And you can see some of the things the new variations are attacking. And then we have these. So these are some of the other botnets. I did a little bit of research. These are some of the other non-traditional botnets. IoT is now a big thing, IoT botnets. Android phones, IP focused on IP cameras, Twitter-based. So it's not going away. Man in the middle. Man in the middle, this one hit a company I used to work at, and it cost us a couple of $1 million. Basically what they did, they inserted themselves into the network. They gained access to an unencrypted overhead projector, and they were basically sitting in on all the meetings and copying the presentations. Here are some man-in-the-middle tools that are readily available. Variations of the Wi-Fi pineapples made by Hack5. This is called a pawn plug. It looks like a power plug. I wish it was only a power plug. Wi-Fi robber. This was from a recent DEF CON. These sold out within the first few hours. This is where we were targeted, and here is the sequence of events. So it wasn't terribly difficult. Here are some of the packets setting up the man in the middle. It often starts off with an ARP poison, and we were not happy when we discovered the source of the leak. That brings me to my last section here. I know we're getting close on time. Looking at applications, web and email attacks. Got several of those. Here's one in email. And you can see again, this malware, this color rule here is targeting key packets. And it's targeting because there's EXEs. And if I do a reassembly, here you go. Here it is being transmitted. And it says, let's be friends. And it has an attachment. It claims to be an audio file. But in reality, it's the name's EXE. It's called the silly worm, and it basically messes with your computer. We have another sample here. This is the last one for the day, I believe. Let's check the slides here. The good old phishing email. Send us all your information. Office 365 and SolarWinds. These have been in the news quite a bit in the last about 6 or 8 months. Various phishing emails. It turns out none of these are for real. This one got my attention. I thought that was almost real because I did check with the courthouse and there was a case number. That was a valid case number. And then it occurred to me that in the United States, by the 4th Amendment of the Constitution, a subpoena has to be served in person, not via email or a phone call or anything. So there was the silly worm. The China Gmail hack. This one occurred several years ago. It was basically a PDF that claimed to be about information about salaries of the top executives. In reality, there's our buddy again, MD5, a lovely backdoor. Only this one led into the Google databases. Here is some samples. Some samples I picked up, looking like, which are right, which are wrong. A couple of banking exploits. And then let's talk about the Z-bot. The Z-bots are a nasty piece of malware that it targets banks, and it's designed to steal customer data. I was talking earlier about the bank with the Hong Kong. This is that Pcap. So here we go. It tells you to look for a pretty innocent sounding file name, except tar.tar is a Linux file extension. And this was a Microsoft Windows network. That's actually what caught my eye. It was then that we looked that it's connecting to a Hong Kong site. And if you search this name on the internet, you're led to the Cisco Talos Security Labs. And they point out that ribbon.tar is one of about 30 aliases for the Z-bots. So here is the malicious payload downloading. And again, it's there. We have a couple of malware flags. Once that file has downloaded onto your computer, it is wrapped in an outer wrapper that contains an extractor that will let you extract that tar file into a Windows system. That triggers the load exe. That's the actual malware. And basically from that point on, they own you. And they will record your keystrokes. And it is targeted, again, as I said, at financial information. Very nasty piece of work. Russian hacker used Z-bots back in 2010. And what they did is her network stole about $12.5 million, 3 million of it from the US, 9.5 million from the UK. But they did it by removing 99 cents from each account. So you can do the math to get 99 cents to add up to $12.5 million. You can figure out just how many accounts they hit. There again, ribbon.tar. And I went around poking around online, and I found a gentleman. Apparently he considers me a trusted member because he offered to sell me the source code for the Z-bots for about $700 US. And that's actually kind of a high price. I went looking around a little bit more and found offers for considerably less. And just in case you think everyone's safe, nah, our poor buddy Santa Claus, he was using the wrong username, and ho 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 is definitely not a good password. And my last example, I got this from a friend that works at NASA. I was teaching a class, he was one of the students, and he said, "You want to see something cool?" And good old International Space Station, you kind of think of the guys in space as being pretty safe. I mean, they're floating around hundreds of miles above us. Well, our friend the Stuxnet actually got into the space station on a USB stick. One of the astronauts brought up a USB stick with files and infected the International Space Station. So the moral of the story is pay attention or you're just wasting time. That looks to me like an exercise in futility. It was from a recent hurricane in Louisiana. And now that brings us up to questions and answer. So how are we looking on questions there, Ross?
It's just the one question right now about the $15 Bluetooth capture tool. You can see that too.
Okay,
Click on the Q&A in the bottom there.
Okay. So someone pointed out in the Tesla that they use Wi-Fi, not Bluetooth. They actually use Bluetooth for system updating, and they use Wi-Fi for connectivity. Okay, so question answers. So $15 Bluetooth. Let me pop over to, we'll shell out over here to Amazon. Don't forget your feedback. Don't forget the feedback. So let me hop over to Amazon. Here's a couple of different ones. Let's see if they have the one in here. There's one there, 418, that targets cameras. I don't see the one I got. Let me see what's coming up here. So let's look for. Okay, not the blue fruit I was looking for. Definitely not. In electronics. And it's going to be persnickety. Also try, what's it called? Data fruit. They may not make them any longer. Here we go. Boy, it's amazing the kind of unrelated things you get when you look on Amazon. See if they'll pop it down into electronics, industrial and scientific, and we still get toothpaste. There's an Adafruit. Send me a quick email and I'll get you the precise information about the particular adapter that I used. I looked over in my drawers over there and it's not quickly readily available. Have you heard about 10% core internet traffic is non-standard protocols? Do I have any knowledge about this? I don't know about the 10%, but I do know that there is an increasing number of non-standard and private protocols that are showing up on the internet, both on the regular internet that everybody gets accesses every day, and also within the networks. I recently did a class for the US Air Force on writing dissectors, the actual Wireshark decoders. And the reason they had the class is because they have about 400 private protocols that don't show up on the internet, and the standard aircraft now use the voice over IP protocol SIP to talk to the control towers. And they developed a proprietary version of SIP, and it has 4 extra bytes in the header. So we were there, we had the guys that wrote the protocol, so they were able to give us an insight into what each of the fields actually meant. And it took us about a day to modify the SIP decoder. So we got a few more here in chat. There we go. Adafruit Bluetooth LE sniffer. That's it. That's it right there. That's it right there. I hope everybody can see that. To go ahead and do a quick screenshot. And that's the one, Adafruit. Very cheap, small form factor, and they work great. Here's your survey link. Thank you, Ross. So when we're finished up here, feel free to go ahead and do a survey. And now, are there... Oh, you can't see it. Okay, well, copy. We will send it to everybody. Hosts and panelists, everyone. There we go. Oh, okay. So we doubled it up. So there you are, twice as good. And then our survey links, did that go out to everyone? Yes, that went out to everyone. Okay. So what other questions can I hopefully answer for somebody? Do we have any others? Well, if not, here's contact information, direct contact, business contact. If you're interested, you can chase me down on LinkedIn. That's about it I do for social media. And then, of course, you can check out our website, cybersecurityinstitute.eu. So, Lions Keep Consulting, we started out as a training company. We offer a series of 10 different classes focused on Wireshark, depending on what your requirements are, including an IoT focus class, a voice focus class, Wi-Fi, the SCADA and ICS, command line tools, a WCNA bootcamp, and then my favorite for network forensics, and then the one I'm teaching this week. Actually, I'm teaching it in Europe. So advanced network and security analysis. That was part of the class that I did back on Tuesday in the pre-conference classes. So that's all, folks. Thank you for attending. I hope you got something useful. These videos will be posted on the SharkFest